Okay, let's unpack this. Family. It's um, it's where so many of our stories begin, isn't it?
It
Often where they unfold. Full of life, connections, sometimes messiness, and just undeniable complexity.
It really is. It's something we all experience in some fundamental way.
Absolutely. And the source you shared with us for this deep dive, it's incredibly rich.
hmm It's a document that pulls together insights from, well, from scripture, deep church tradition, and it also grapples head-on with the real, sometimes challenging realities families navigate right now.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to journey through this source material together. We want to pull out the most important, nuggets of knowledge.
Yeah, get a handle on the core vision of love and life it presents.
Exactly. And understand the specific challenges it identifies for families today. Think of it as maybe a guided tour to help you understand what this particular perspective offers on family life.
And it starts right where you'd expect, grounding the idea of family deep within the biblical story itself.
From the very beginning, you see family dynamics playing out right away with Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, all that early drama and, well, the foundational relationship.
Definitely. And it follows all the way through to the end of Revelation, pointing towards that ultimate sense of belonging, the wedding feast of the Lamb.
It does, and the Bible uses some really powerful, enduring images to describe families, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Like
Mhm.
Jesus talking about building a house on solid rock versus shifting sand.
Hmm.
I mean, that speaks volumes about the foundation of family life.
Right.
And one quote here refers to every home as a lampstand, which is just a beautiful picture, isn't it? A family shining light in the world.
I love that lampstand image. And Psalm 128, it paints such a vivid scene, describes the wife as a fruitful vine inside the house, the children like olive shoots gathered around the table.
It's lovely. And what's fascinating is how it connects the Hebrew word for son, ben, to the verb bana, meaning to build.
Okay.
It's saying children aren't just additions, they're actively building the family, the house, through their very lives.
That idea of building and continuity, it's reinforced in Psalm 127 too, right?
Mhm.
Talking about sons being a heritage.
Exactly, like arrows in the hand of a warrior, carrying the family's story forward through generations.
And this leads into that powerful New Testament concept the document highlights. The family home becoming a domestic church. What does that look like exactly?
Well, it's the idea that the home isn't just a physical space, but a spiritual one, too. A place where the Eucharist can be shared, where Christ's presence is real.
Like that quote from Revelation, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock."
Precisely. Revelation 3:20. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him and he with me. It's this vision of the divine, joining the everyday family table.
So the home becomes a sacred space, not just a living space. And a core part of this vision is the family's role in passing on faith.
Oh, absolutely central. The document points straight to the Passover celebration in Exodus and Deuteronomy, where the ritual is explained generationally. When your child asks you, you shall say.
Right, teaching the next generation.
And Psalm 78 talks about reciting God's glorious deeds so they're known to future generations. It's a clear message. Parents are seen as the primary educators in faith, the first ones to hand on this incredible legacy.
And this responsibility isn't just one way, is it? I mean, the source brings up Proverbs where parents educate.
Yes, but also the fourth commandment where children honor their parents. And to honor means more than just being polite, right?
Right, it implies fulfilling commitments.
Exactly, to family and society. The document even references Jesus critiquing those who used religious excuses to avoid caring for their aging parents. It shows how deeply rooted this mutual responsibility is.
Sirach adds that honoring parents atones for sins, like laying up treasure.
Yeah, it's quite powerful.
So there's this beautiful ideal of mutual responsibility and passing on faith. But the document is also very clear that the biblical story isn't just, sunshine and roses when it comes to families.
Far from it. No, it confronts the tough stuff. Cain and Abel, the constant disputes among the patriarchs and their wives, the tragedies within King David's family.
Job's complained about his own kinsfolk abandoning him.
Right, the problems in the story of Tobias. The suffering, the conflict, the failure within families, they're definitely part of the picture Scripture paints.
And Jesus' own family life had its complexities born into modest circumstances, having to flee as refugees to Egypt.
Mm-hmm. And the document notes that while he was obedient to Mary and Joseph, he also showed that the call to the kingdom might mean redefining or even leaving traditional family structures behind.
Like when he said his true family were those who hear and do God's word.
Exactly. It shows that family is central, but the call of faith can also challenge traditional bonds in pretty profound ways.
Speaking of Jesus, the document then explores his actual interactions with families. He wasn't distant from everyday family life at all, was he?
Not in the slightest. We see him visiting homes like Peter's mother-in-law's, immediately stepping into that domestic space.
And he deeply sympathized with families in moments of crisis and grief. Jairus losing his daughter, the widow of Nain.
Lazarus, Martha and Mary grieving. He was right there with them. He healed children like the epileptic boy.
And importantly, he didn't just visit the homes of the respectable. He ate with tax collectors like Matthew and Zacchaeus.
Visited the house of Simon the Pharisee where the sinful woman was present. He really stepped into messy, imperfect family situations.
And he drew on common family anxieties in his parables: prodigal sons, troublesome children, worries about resources like wedding wine or a lost coin. It makes his teaching incredibly relatable, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So the takeaway here, according to the source, is that the Word of God isn't some abstract set of pronouncements about families,
Right.
but it's presented as a source of comfort, companionship, and real hope for families struggling with very real difficulties and suffering. It points towards that ultimate promise where, all tears will be wiped away.
That's a crucial reframing. Okay, now, let's look at the ideal vision this document presents for the family, seeing it as a vocation, a sacrament, and lived out in daily life.
Right. At its core, the vision is the family as a communion of persons entrusted to a man, a woman, and children.
And this communion is seen as mirroring the divine Trinity, that ultimate community of love.
Precisely. And procreation and raising children is presented as sharing in God's own creative work.
So how does this family unit become that domestic church we mentioned in practice?
Well, through things like daily prayer together, reading the Word of God, sharing in the Eucharist, it's about intentionally inviting God's presence into the home.
The Holy Family of Nazareth is held up as the icon, the model here.
Yes, but their daily life wasn't idealized. It had burdens, challenges like fleeing Herod's violence, just like countless refugee families today face.
Right. They face those challenges with courage and serenity. And Mary, in particular, is highlighted for her posture of sort of keeping things in her heart.
Yeah, it suggests that the messy, complicated experiences of every family are also held and can be understood in a deeper spiritual context.
And marriage itself is framed not just as a choice or a contract, but as a vocation.
A specific call from God to live conjugal love as a sign of Christ's love for the church. That means the decision to marry isn't just about personal preference. It should be a process of discernment. Asking, is this the path God is calling you to?
And the sacrament of matrimony is seen as rooted in baptism, providing the grace needed for that total self-giving, faithful, and fruitful commitment.
Exactly. Married couples are seen as the dynamic heart of the family.
The document also touches on the biblical view of work. It's not just about making a living, is it?
No, it's presented as essential to human dignity, a way to provide for the family's physical needs, sure, but also to cultivate one's own gifts. Like Psalm 128 says, you shall eat the fruit of your hands.
Okay. This leads beautifully into the document's deep dive into the very nature of love itself, drawing extensively from St. Paul's famous chapter, 1 Corinthians 13.
It really does. It unpacks what these qualities of love mean, specifically within the context of family life.
Okay, let's dig into these one by one. First, love is patient, macrothyme. The source says this means being slow to anger, like God himself is described in Exodus.
Right. And it's more than just, gritting your teeth and enduring. It's about recognizing that your spouse, your children, your family members have a right to be themselves.
With their own pace, their own struggles.
Even their own annoying habits. It's about having that deep compassion that accepts others as they are rather than constantly wishing they were different. It warns against bitterness, wrath, and anger getting the upper hand.
Next one's simple enough. Love is kind. Being at the service of others, putting their needs before your own.
Then love is not jealous or envious. Zloy. Love has no room for that feeling of, discomfort or sadness when someone else has something good happen to them.
So it's the opposite of that competitive urge. Envy sees another's success as a threat.
Whereas love values their achievements, celebrates them, and recognizes that everyone has different gifts and different paths. It connects this to not coveting what others have, leading to esteem and recognizing their right to happiness.
Love is not boastful or arrogant or rude. Okay, this seems straightforward humility and respect in relationships.
Not needing to prove you're better, showing consideration even when it's tough, avoiding aggression, and practicing the art of listening and sharing. Really listening.
Love is generous, giving freely, focused on the other's good.
Okay, and then love is not irritable or resentful. Oligizatite to kakan, literally, it does not calculate evil. This is so key to family life.
Doesn't keep score.
Exactly. The opposite of resentment is forgiveness. Resentment grows when we constantly look for faults, imagine bad intentions, keep that running tally of wrongs.
Yeah, and the source points out that seeing every small problem as a huge crisis makes us unduly harsh.
Right. While defending dignity is important, love combats that impulse towards vengeance.
And love forgives is presented as possible and desirable, but definitely not easy.
No, family life requires enormous patience. Forbearance, reconciliation, selfishness, and conflict wound that deep communion.
There's a really profound point here about forgiving others, often requiring the liberating experience of forgiving ourselves first.
Yes. Our own mistakes or criticism can make us pull back. The document says we need to kind of pray over our past, accept our own limitations, and forgive ourselves to truly have that same attitude towards others.
And this capacity to forgive, according to the source, flows from experiencing God's unconditional forgiveness.
If you accept that God's love for you is freely given, no strings attached, it frees you up to show that same kind of boundless love and forgiveness. It prevents family life from becoming, a minefield of tension and criticism.
Love rejoices with the right, finding joy in truth and moral conduct. The document links this to love, allowing us to see the inherent worth and dignity in another human being.
Okay, now let's look at these powerful final four phrases, all starting with all things. First, love bears all things, pentastigai. This specific term is linked to controlling the tongue.
The tongue. Holding one's peace about another's faults. Limiting judgment, like Jesus taught. Not speaking evil.
Right. The source calls slander a grave sin, especially when it damages someone's good name. It quotes the book of James, calling the tongue a world of iniquity, a restless evil.
Wow.
Love, in contrast, actively protects the good name of others. For married couples, this means speaking well of each other, highlighting their good points, and choosing silence rather than speaking ill.
It flows from an inner attitude that sees weaknesses in context, recognizing everyone as a mix of strengths and weaknesses.
And importantly, accepting imperfection. The source says love doesn't demand perfection to be valuable. The other person loves as best they can within their limits. If you expect too much, they'll inevitably fall short. Love lives alongside imperfection.
Love believes all things,
Yeah.
Tanta Pistue. This is about trust. It's not about being naive.
No, not at all. It's about seeing God's light in the other person, even amidst darkness. This trust creates a specific kind of freedom in relationships.
Freedom? How so?
By removing the need to constantly control or monitor the other person, love trusts, it sets them free, it doesn't try to possess. This freedom, the document suggests, allows sincerity and transparency to flourish.
Okay. If you feel constantly suspected, you're more likely to hide this.
Exactly. A family built on loving trust helps everyone feel safe enough to be themselves and reject deceit.
Love hopes all things. This means believing in the future of the other person and their potential for change and growth.
And ultimately, this hope finds its deepest meaning in the certainty of life after death, seeing each person called to that heavenly fullness where our earthly weaknesses will pass away. It's seeing people with a supernatural perspective through the lens of enduring hope.
And finally, love endures all things. Pantahypomene, perseverance and steadfastness.
This is about maintaining fidelity and patience even when things get incredibly difficult, when trials hit hard, keeping on together.
Wow. That breakdown of 1 Corinthians 13 really makes it practical, doesn't it? It shows that building married love is truly a spiritual journey, requiring intentional effort.
It absolutely does. The document describes growing in conjugal love as this ongoing process. Lifelong sharing in marriage is called the greatest form of friendship.
It has all the classic elements of friendship: concern, intimacy, stability, warmth, reciprocity.
Right, but adds that unique, indissoluble commitment to sharing all of life together.
And this commitment is societal, too. Marrying for love, according to the source, means seeing it as more than just a feeling or a private agreement.
It's a visible, public commitment that signals a seriousness about belonging to one another and moving beyond maybe adolescent individualism. It's an institution that protects that deep, shared commitment for the good of society.
And the document stresses the daily, simple ways love grows, remembering those key simple words: please, thank you, and sorry.
So crucial and often forgotten, aren't they? It also emphasizes the importance of dialogue, and this isn't just talking, it's described as an apprenticeship in patient, attentive listening.
Cultivating inner silence to really hear the other person without immediately jumping in with solutions or distractions.
Sometimes the other person just needs you to be present, to hear and acknowledge their feelings, their pain, their hopes. The document advises against seeing your partner as a rival in dialogue where you're just trying to win an argument.
Positions should be based on values, not just proving you're right.
And you need something to say to have meaningful dialogue, right? That comes from nourishing your inner life, reading, reflection, prayer. Otherwise, conversations can become shallow or trivial.
Yeah. The document also includes passionate love, seeing the erotic dimension as a good gift from God that enriches marriage.
Yes, but it's vital that this passion is sublimated by love, transforming it from something potentially tainted by excess or a use and discard mentality into a pure, unadulterated affirmation of the other person.
It acknowledges that transforming love takes time. It's a process moving from initial feelings to a shared life project.
Learning to negotiate for the good of the family, give and take, finding solutions where everyone gains. Yes, learning to negotiate happens at each stage.
It's accepting marriage as a process where spouses help each other mature. The document beautifully calls each marriage a salvation history that grows from fragile beginnings, with God's help and a generous response from the couple.
And it stresses the need for dedicated time and space for dialogue, connection, and even just comfortable shared silence. Very important.
For couples where one spouse isn't a believer, the document suggests finding common values and seeing the act of showing love for that spouse as a path of sanctification for the believing partner.
Moving on, the document explores how this love becomes fruitful, beginning with welcoming new life. Pregnancy is described as a difficult but wonderful time.
Where the mother joins with God in creation, highlighting the immense creative potential of the female body.
And this fruitfulness isn't limited to biological children. The document explicitly mentions adoptive and fostering families, affirming those paths to building a family.
That's important. It also expands the idea of family fruitfulness to include the wider network. Jesus' own family wasn't isolated. They interacted with wider relatives and friends.
Right, it shows the importance of the nuclear family being connected to a larger community. That connection is crucial. The nuclear family needs interaction with parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors.
Because the document notes that individualism can lead to isolation.
Exactly, but this wider network offers vital assistance, companionship, and affection. There's a whole section dedicated to the importance of being sons and daughters and honoring parents again, tied to the fourth commandment.
It reminds us that we are all recipients of life. We are all sons and daughters.
And this bond between generations is seen as essential, a guarantee for the future. A society where children don't honor parents is described as lacking honor itself.
The elderly are specifically mentioned as a precious presence, needing not just practical assistance, but affection and support.
Especially from the broader community if their immediate family is absent, and being brothers and sisters within the family is highlighted as a fundamental school of freedom and peace.
Learning to live together, to care for the frail or sick sibling. It's described as a profound and unique experience.
The document acknowledges the challenge in societies with many only children, and the need to ensure they still learn these social skills and aren't isolated.
The idea of having a big heart ties this together. The larger family includes friends, other families, and communities who support one another, helping avoid isolation and fostering deeper communion.
Okay, so the document then makes a pivot to confront the current realities and significant challenges families face today. It acknowledges the complexity, the lights and shadows influenced by rapid cultural changes.
Increased freedom, shifts in roles.
Right, but it raises a real concern about the growing danger of extreme individualism. This, it argues, weakens family bonds, treating members as isolated individuals driven solely by their own desires for possessions and pleasures.
Which can lead to intolerance and aggression within the home.
Yeah. Other challenges listed include unstable or narcissistic personalities that prevent maturity, the widespread availability of pornography, the commercialization and exploitation of the human body.
Through things like forced prostitution, Couples are described as sometimes uncertain, hesitant to commit.
And crisis leading to separation and divorce is presented as having serious consequences, especially for children who are called innocent victims.
Marital problems are often handled, the source suggests, too hastily, without patience, reflection, sacrifice, or forgiveness.
And failures lead to new relationships, civil unions, or subsequent marriages, creating very complex situations for families.
The lack of dignified and affordable housing is also named as a factor that delays relationships and stability.
Yes, the document emphasizes the right to decent housing for families, underscoring that deep link between a family and its home.
Now, the source takes a clear stance here, stating that weakening the family founded on marriage is detrimental to society.
It posits that only the exclusive and indissoluble union between a man and a woman, open to new life, has a full and unique role in society as a stable foundation.
And it follows this by saying that de facto unions, or same-sex unions, may not simply be equated with marriage.
Right. It argues that temporary unions or unions that are closed off to the possibility of life cannot secure the future of society, and then pointedly asks who is actively working to strengthen traditional marriages and support them.
The document notes the variety of global practices, like polygamy, arranged marriages, couples living together without the intention of formal marriage.
And it observes that legislation facilitating alternatives can make traditional marriage seem old-fashioned, maybe based on individual will rather than a social commitment.
But while rejecting older, authoritarian family structures is seen as legitimate.
The document argues this shouldn't devalue marriage itself, but should lead to its rediscovery and renewal. It insists that the strength of family lies in its capacity to love and teach love, and it can always grow from that starting point.
Women's rights are discussed, acknowledging significant advances, but insisting much remains to be done.
Especially regarding ill treatment, domestic violence, and enslavement, which are described starkly as craven acts of cowardice. Genital mutilation and lack of access to dignified work are also mentioned.
It critiques the excesses of patriarchal cultures. It raises concerns about surrogate motherhood and the exploitation and commercialization of the female body in media.
And the source strongly refutes the argument that problems are caused by women's emancipation, calling this false, untrue, a form of male chauvinism.
It affirms the equal dignity of men and women and sees the women's movement positively.
As the working of the spirit towards recognizing this dignity and rights, yes.
So it paints a picture of significant challenges and cultural shifts impacting families. How does the document suggest providing support through pastoral care?
Well, it talks about the church needing to cooperate with parents in their fundamental role as educators of their children, recognizing them as ministers of education through the sacrament of marriage.
Preparation for marriage is a big piece of this, not just immediate prep.
No, remote preparation, starting from childhood with good examples, and then timely preparation in the community to help couples realistically assess their relationship, identify potential problems,
and even discern if breaking off the engagement might be wiser if fundamental issues exist.
Right. Engaged couples need to deeply discuss expectations, their understanding of love and commitment, what kind of life they truly want to build together. It's about moving beyond initial attraction to seeing if they share core values and have a solid foundation.
It encourages realistic trust in helping a partner grow, but also a willingness to face sacrifices and conflicts together.
And detecting danger signs before the wedding is emphasized. The source suggests many marry without truly knowing the depth of the other person or being prepared for the challenges ahead.
It's crucial that marriage prep sees the wedding not as the finish line, but the beginning of a lifelong calling that requires a firm decision to face trials together.
It should help couples deepen their love and offer practical guidance for navigating problems.
Accompanying couples in the crucial first years is also highlighted, especially if they married young or had a short engagement.
Yes, marriage is presented as a lifelong project, requiring spouses to accept each other as an unfinished product, needing to grow, a work in progress. The document warns specifically against the destructiveness of constant criticism.
This growth happens through stages. It's learning to see life as a common project and learning to negotiate for the family's good. What does that look like?
It's give and take, aiming for situations where both people gain, not where one wins and one loses.
The source calls marriage a salvation history, a process of growth from perhaps fragile beginnings with God's grace and the couple's generous response.
And it stresses the absolute necessity of making time and space for dialogue, connection, and even shared silence.
Resources like family liturgies and devotionals are mentioned.
But the most vital resource is simply time. The document notes the pressures of modern life, work, gadgets that steal quality time. Couples glued to phones at the dinner table are, in a sense, fleeing potentially uncomfortable closeness.
Couples who manage this well are encouraged to share their practical tips.
The document doesn't shy away from the reality of crises in marriage. It actually frames them not just negatively, but as part of the dramatic beauty of family life.
Potential opportunities for growth and strengthening the union, maturing the wine of their union. I like that phrase.
Me too. It then directly addresses accompaniment after breakdown and divorce, highlighting the severe consequences for children, calling them innocent victims.
And it makes a strong appeal to parents to never use children as pawns or speak poorly of the other parent, as this causes deep wounds.
Right. The source states clearly that the church advocates for these vulnerable children. It calls on Christian communities not to abandon divorced parents in new unions.
But to include and support them in raising their children, explicitly saying they shouldn't be made to feel excommunicated.
Exactly. Healing the parents' wounds and supporting them spiritually ultimately benefits the children, who need that sense of belonging and the familiar face of the church community.
Divorce is called an evil, and its increase deeply troubling. The pastoral task is strengthening love, healing wounds, and preventing this suffering.
The document touches on complex situations, like persons in complex marital situations seeking baptism, noting that this requires careful pastoral discernment.
And it addresses families with members who experience same-sex attraction. It firmly reaffirms respect for their dignity.
And calls for avoiding unjust discrimination, aggression, or violence. It specifically calls for a respectful pastoral guidance to assist those with a homosexual orientation to understand and fully carry out God's will in their lives. Again, just reporting the source's view here.
Understood. The document then turns to the universal experience of death and its impact on families. Acknowledges the pain, the sting, but offers the light of faith as crucial support.
Yeah, it calls turning away from a grieving family a lack of mercy. It deeply understands the anguish, noting Jesus weeping at Lazarus' tomb.
The grief of parents losing a child is particularly singled out. Time stops, and it can lead to anger with God. Losing a spouse is profoundly difficult.
And support for those without close relatives is essential. The grieving process is acknowledged as taking time, requiring pastoral care to be adaptable. Questions about why or what if are natural. Prayer and interior liberation are seen as paths to peace.
A key point here is that after a loss, we still have a mission in life. Prolonging suffering indefinitely isn't helpful.
Right, loved ones don't need us to ruin our lives as a tribute. Dwelling only on the past isn't the best expression of love. It can be a form of unhealthy dependency. Love is described as strong as death, involving an intuition of the unseen.
And accepting that loved ones are changed, like Jesus gently redirecting Mary Magdalene after the resurrection to a new kind of encounter.
Consolation comes from the belief that those who die don't simply vanish. Faith offers hope in meeting Christ after death, in that state what God has prepared. Life isn't ended, but changed. They're held securely in God's hands.
And maintaining fellowship with the dead is seen as possible and good through prayer for them.
Yes, the source quotes the book of Maccabees, calling prayer for the dead holy and pious, benefiting them and allowing their intercession for us. It mentions saints like Teresa of Lisieux and Dominic promising help from heaven.
Reinforcing the bonds of love that death does not break, but rather reinforces in a different way.
And accepting the reality of death allows us to prepare. How? By growing in love for those around us now and preparing ourselves to meet loved ones again. The source suggests that the better we live and mature here on earth, the greater the happiness we will share together in heaven.
Bringing more gifts for the heavenly banquet. Wow.
Okay.
Shifting gears significantly now, the document dedicates a lot of attention to the crucial topic of educating children.
It starts with a very direct question to parents. Where are our children? And not just physically.
Right, but existentially, their soul, convictions, goals, desires, do we want to know?
And it makes a key distinction between obsession and education. Using the phrase, time is greater than space, it argues that starting healthy processes is more important than trying to constantly control or dominate every aspect of a child's life.
Obsessing about knowing where they are physically isn't education. It's controlling space, not fostering their growth in freedom, maturity, and autonomy.
Children need to develop the inner resources to navigate life themselves. Ethical formation is about shaping their will, fostering good habits, helping them see desirable ways of thinking and acting as part of their growth.
Towards fitting into society and understanding that foregoing immediate pleasure for a greater good is valuable.
And this needs to be taught inductively, through experience and example, not just rigidly imposed rules. Doing what is right requires more than just head knowledge. It needs an effective inclination, a thirst for the good.
Showing children how ethical behavior is ultimately in their own best interest is key.
And developing simple good habits like saying please, thank you, sorry, is seen as building blocks for moral conduct through repetition.
Freedom is presented as magnificent, but also fragile, something that can be lost. Moral education cultivates freedom.
By helping children develop stable inner principles to choose good. Virtue builds and shapes freedom, protecting against impulses that can dehumanize. True dignity requires conscious, free choice.
The document advises patient realism in education, proposing steps that aren't overwhelmingly difficult, small, understandable actions.
Right. Demanding too much too soon can lead to resentment or a rejection of good behavior later on. Gradualness is essential, considering each child's age and abilities.
Psychology shows that development is gradual, and freedom needs channeling and guidance, not just being left undirected.
The document distinguishes between actions that are voluntary, meaning you want to do them, perhaps driven by impulse or poor habits, and truly free, meaning you chose them without internal compulsion.
It uses the example of a compulsive addict. They voluntarily desire the drug but aren't free in their choice, highlighting the need for help.
Family life is seen as the primary educational setting, the first school for human values, and learning how to use freedom wisely. Children learn so much by osmosis, that's just how we do things in our family.
And families also need to help children develop a critical sense against media messages that might undermine family values.
Education and hope is vital in our fast-paced world, especially against the wanting it all now mentality fostered by digital speed. Learning to postpone desires teaches self-mastery and detachment.
Responsibility builds self-esteem and teaches respect for the freedom of others. The family is the first place for socialization learning to relate, listen, share, be patient.
And move beyond self-absorption to care about others. Daily interactions teach children that others are worthy of concern and kindness.
Families are also seen as agents of integral ecology, rethinking consumption, and caring for the environment.
And experiencing illness within the family can teach sensitivity and facing limitations.
Communication media are acknowledged as helpful, especially for distant family, but the document is firm. They cannot replace personal, face-to-face dialogue.
Which includes physical presence and hearing a voice's nuances. They can even keep people apart, like phones at the dinner table. Families need to actively discuss and set boundaries around device use.
The risks for children include apathy, disconnection from the real world, a sort of technological disconnect from human relationship.
Now, a specific and often sensitive area of education the document addresses is sex education. It references Vatican II's call for it to be positive and prudent.
Acknowledging how difficult this is in a culture of trivialization, it must be integrated within a broader education for love and self-giving.
Yes, the language used around sexuality needs to illuminate, not impoverish. The sexual urge is a gift from God, meant to be channeled through self-knowledge and control towards authentic joy and loving encounter, not just impulsive gratification.
Information needs to be age-appropriate and delivered at the right time. It should help children develop a critical sense against the flood of pornography and stimuli that deform sexuality.
Helping them discern healthy influences from harmful ones. A new and more appropriate language is needed for this today.
The value of modesty is highlighted not as prudishness, but as something that protects privacy, prevents objectification,
and guards against an unhealthy obsession with genitality that can lead to unhealthy behaviors and even violence.
The document offers a strong critique of focusing solely on safe sex for protection.
It argues this conveys a negative view of procreation, as if a child were an enemy, and promotes narcissism and aggression. It calls it irresponsible to encourage adolescents to experiment with bodies and desires without the maturity or commitment required for authentic intimacy.
Essentially using others as objects.
Right.
How?
Instead, sex education should teach sensitivity to expressions of love, mutual concern, loving respect, and communication, preparing young people for the total gift of self that is meant to follow a public, lifelong commitment like marriage.
The sexual union is seen as a powerful sign of that commitment.
It warns against confusing sexual attraction with true union, quoting Eric Fromm. Attraction can create the illusion of intimacy, but without love, people remain strangers.
The language of the body requires learning, an apprenticeship. Giving everything away too soon can ultimately mean giving nothing of real value.
And the document poses that poignant question: who speaks of these things today? Who takes young people seriously?
It also emphasizes respecting and appreciating differences, specifically the difference between male and female. Accepting one's own body as created male or female is fundamental for self-awareness.
And finding mutual enrichment in the distinct gifts of the other sex. Losing fear of difference frees us from self-centeredness and avoids the pretense of trying to cancel out sexual difference.
Masculinity and femininity are seen as shaped by more than just biology, temperament, history, culture, experience all play a role. They aren't rigid boxes.
Exactly. A husband adapting to his wife's work or taking on chores doesn't lessen his masculinity. Avoiding rigid stereotypes allows for the development of a full range of abilities and appreciates genuine reciprocity between men and women.
Okay. Finally, the document turns to the complex area of accompanying, discerning, and integrating weakness in difficult situations.
Right. It discusses pastoral care for those in civil marriages or cohabiting. It notes that when these unions show stability, deep affection, and responsibility for children, they can be opportunities for pastoral care that might eventually lead towards sacramental marriage.
It expresses concern about young people today who distrust marriage, live together indefinitely, or quickly break commitments and start new ones.
These individuals need merciful and helpful pastoral care. Pastors need pastoral discernment to identify positive elements in these diverse situations that can foster evangelization and growth, gently guiding people towards the fullness of the gospel vision for marriage.
This discernment involves understanding the law of gradualness, a concept from St. John Paul II.
Yes, it's about recognizing that humans grow in their ability to know, love, and live the moral good in stages.
Importantly, the document clarifies that this is not a gradualness of the law itself, as if the law changed.
Precisely. It's a gradualness in how people, who may not yet be fully able to grasp or live out the law's full demands, prudentially exercise their free acts on their journey. The law is seen as a gift for everyone to be followed with grace. The humans integrate God's gifts and demands gradually over time and experience.
So the church helps people in these irregular situations understand this journey, the divine pedagogy, and works with them to reach the fullness of God's plan.
Which is always possible through the power of the Holy Spirit. And a truly crucial point here is the discernment of individual responsibility. The document states unequivocally that the degree of responsibility is not the same in all cases.
It lists factors from the Catechism that can mitigate culpability: ignorance, inadvertence, duress, fear, habit, inordinate attachments, psychological or social factors.
This is key. A negative judgment about an objective situation like a marriage breakdown does not automatically imply a judgment about a person's individual culpability.
Pastoral discernment, working with an individual's conscience, must consider these mitigating factors. The consequences or effects of a moral situation aren't always equal for everyone involved.
Yes, it suggests questions for divorced and remarried individuals to consider, like how they treat their children, their efforts towards reconciliation, the impact of a new relationship, and their example to youth. It's very nuanced.
The document concludes by articulating a spirituality for marriage and family life. It's one centered on Christ.
Yes. If a family keeps Christ at the heart, he unifies and illumines their entire life.
Any pain or difficulty is experienced in union with Christ's suffering on the cross, and his closeness helps families overcome those trials.
Even in the darkest hours, union with Jesus in his moments of abandonment can help couples avoid breaking their bond.
This spirituality involves supernatural communion through shared prayer, reading the Word, and the Eucharist.
It's a spirituality of exclusive and free love, meant to be a reflection of Christ's love for the church. And it's a spirituality of mutual care, consolation, and encouragement.
It brings everything together beautifully, and the document offers a prayer to the Holy Family at the end, summarizing the ideals of family life.
Asking for grace to live them out, for families to be places of communion, prayer, schools of the gospel, domestic churches, and for those who are hurting to find comfort and healing.
We certainly covered a vast amount of ground in this deep dive. Wow. From the ancient roots of family in the Bible.
Through the ideal vision of love and life presented in the document, the many challenging realities families face today, the vital role of education, both ethical and sex ed.
And how pastoral care, discernment, and mercy are called to accompany families through all of it.
It really gives you a specific lens, doesn't it? A way to view the immense complexity and profound beauty of family life, highlighting the potential for growth, joy, and deep connection, even amidst pain, imperfection, and difficult circumstances.
It really does. And that point about discerning individual responsibility, How mitigating factors mean that the consequences of a rule aren't always the same for every person in every complex situation.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff.
Yeah, thinking about that, how might really trying to recognize the full complexity of someone's life, looking beyond simple rules or quick judgments to truly understand the whole picture of their situation, how might that change the way we approach and support the families around us? That's definitely something to ponder, isn't it?